Okay, now I've got to the stage on this drum where the glue is set, and all I've got to do is trim this edge up, trim the edge of the finish up. Now, a lot of restorers would probably take a knife to it, but I find that a bit tatty, and I like the drums to look pretty much like they did when Ludwig finished with them. So I like the finish to go right up to the bearing edge and blend in nicely with the bearing edge. So in order to do that, what you need is a metal file, and put it on the drum at an angle like that, which is like that. And away you go. It helps to keep the angle consistent as much as you can. Get the glue off. It also helps to cut the finish to pretty much the right size on the drum. Don't go too big. You'll have to go a little bit over, but a little bit over is fine. But you don't want, you know, an inch or so over. Just show you what this looks like. It's just a quick rough 5 minutes. Okay. So as you can see, it goes right up to the edge, but not on the edge. Right up to the edge. And it looks nice and neat. Now I'm going to carry on doing this all the way around the drum, then I'm going to show you what else I'm going to do to it. So now I've trimmed up all the edges. Now in most cases that'll be enough. You just drill out the holes now and put the hardware back on. But in this particular case it's an old drum, and it's been through the wars a bit. Now if I put this on a flat surface, it rocks around. Now that could be because of age. It could be that it left the factory like that, but it's going to be quite hard to tune this drum if it's not completely flat. So I'm going to do some work on the edges. Now all I've got here is a flat board with some fairly rough sandpaper stuck to it, and I'm going to put this drum here and I'm going to spin it. Now what that will do will flatten the bearing edge, and it will get all the chips out, which will be a good basis to be able to create a really nice bearing edge. And I'm going to do that on this drum on both sides, then I'll show you what it looks like afterwards. So now I've finished spinning this drum on the board, and the edges are nice and flat. It doesn't rock around. Just come around and show you that if I can. It's hard to see, but it's starting to take shape now. It's starting to look a bit more like a bearing edge from a Ludwig of the 60s, a classic sort of Ludwig bearing edge. Now, that isn't finished. That isn't finished. That's way too flat, so I'm going to have to do a bit more work. Now, a lot of noise gets made about bearing edges, whether it be a 45-degree angle or a 30-degree angle. Now, the bearing edge shape from a Ludwig from the 1960s is actually quite easy to replicate. It's not that complicated. Now, I've had a lot of practice doing this, and also I've got a lot of Ludwig drums around to refer to. But this is basically what I do. Now, go back to the drum, just like you were when you were trimming up the finish. And just go down the drum again. Now I'm going to have to make about 10 passes around each side of this drum before an angle gets made that looks a bit more like a bearing edge. So at this point I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to take some photos and put the photos on the video so you can see them a little bit more clearly about what's going on. Now that photograph showed you there was quite a nice angle on the bearing edge. So when I get to that stage and it's nice and consistent around the edge, metal file again, just a slightly flatter angle this time, just to get rid of that line. Won't take long, maybe a couple of passes, something like that. And then when that's done, sandpaper, just lightly go around the edge. This is quite fine sandpaper. Lightly go around the edge, and that'll turn into a lovely curve. Now for me that's not quite enough, because when I spun that on a board, the support hoop got flattened as well, and it's quite flat up against the bearing edge, it doesn't slope away. So I'm just going to take that into the workshop, and I've got a machine that will just sort that out so the support hoop will slope away from the bearing edge. Now all I'm going to do then is probably sand this down internally, paint it up with the paint that I'm using on the other drums, which is a little bit more accurate to the Ludwig Restoration, and then it'll be ready to put the hardware back on.